Hello students, my name is Mihir Shah and today we are going to start with the first chapter of geography. So let us talk about chapter number 8, natural resources. Yes students, we are going to discuss this chapter called natural resources. Now let us start with the introduction. Now, talking about natural resources, first of all, let us understand what we mean by the word resource. Yes, we need to understand first of all what is resource. So, resource means the things on which the man is dependent, where human needs can be fulfilled by them, and man has a physical and intellectual capacity to utilize them. Yes, is called as a resource. I repeat, the things on which man is dependent, where our needs are satisfied, where we are able to utilize it, such things are called as resource. Or we can define resource in another way, that is, it is a source or supply from which a benefit is produced, something we get out of it. Yes, when we utilize, we get some benefit. Resources can broadly be classified upon their availability. So, we can classify resources into two parts, that is, renewable and non-renewable resources from availability point of view. I repeat, we can classify resources, yes, into two parts or into two categories, that is, renewable and non-renewable resources. So now the question comes, what are renewable resources and what are non-renewable resources? So let us first of all understand what are renewable resources. The word itself is saying renewable. It's renewable. That means resources once get exhausted can be regenerated. A resource which can be used repeatedly and replaced naturally. Yes, we have the examples like solar energy, yes, which we get from sun. It never runs out. Yes, we have the examples like oxygen, fresh water, biomass. These are all sources of renewable resource. Yes, or these are all the examples of renewable resource. I hope students you are able to understand what is renewable resource. Coming to next category, we have non-renewable resource. Again, the word itself clarifies the meaning non-renewable, that is, which cannot be renewed. That means once the resources are exhausted or the resource is exhausted, it is exhausted forever. Yes, that means it might take some hundred thousands of years to regenerate. So those resources are categorized as non-renewable resources. So let us see here. A non-renewable resource is a natural resource that is used up faster than it can be made by nature. It can be used up faster. Yes, before the nature reproduce, it is used up. It cannot be produced, grown, or generated on a scale which can sustain how quickly it is being consumed. In short, in a simple way, the consumption rate is on a higher side. Yes, on the contrary, the production rate is on a slower side. We have examples like fossil fuels such as coal, petroleum, natural gas. Yes, even we have nuclear power, uranium, thorium. They are the examples of non-renewable resources. And we have many more examples likewise, yes, which are categorized as a non-renewable resource. So students, we are able to understand now what is a resource, what are renewable resource and what are non-renewable resource. Let us move further. So now we are going to discuss about what is a natural resource. As the name of the chapter says, yes, natural resources. Then what we mean by natural resource? Natural resource is something we can say the resource which we get easily from nature, which is a gift of nature. A natural resource is what people can use, which comes from the natural environment. Example of natural resources are air, water, wood, oil, wind energy, natural gas, iron, coal. These are all examples of natural resources which we get from nature. Straight away, easily we get it from nature without any cost. They are called as natural resources. But these natural resources should have utility and capability to work. Utility is usefulness. I repeat, utility means usefulness. Now the resources are made up of interactions of three things. Three things or three areas have to be interacted: nature, man, and culture. Interaction of these three will make a resource. So yes, students, I hope things are clear to you and you are very much clear with the word natural resource. Now, moving further, we'll discuss about uses of resources. Now we know resources can be utilized in many ways. Resources can be utilized in many ways. We have learnt about its role gradually. Yes, at the end of human life, all activities, right from agriculture to industries, yes, ultimately depend on natural resources. You take any activity, yes, these activities ultimately they depend on natural resource. Let us see. So we can say we can we can just bifurcate likewise resources acting as a food, resourcing acting as a source of raw material, or resourcing acting as a source of energy. When we talk about resource as a food, various food requirements of man are complied by various resources or are satisfied by various resources. Fruits grown naturally, various crops obtained through agriculture, milk and its products, meat obtained through domestic animals, fish and other aquatic animals from reservoirs, honey prepared by honeybees. So these are ultimately food items which we get from the resource. So this is how resource act as a food. Now resource as a raw material, as a source of raw material. So various goods obtained from forest, agro products, wool, hide, that is animal skin. Hides is nothing but animal's skin, and meat available from animals, minerals, ores, etc. form the raw material for many industries. These are all such products, they are resource, but along with being resource, they are acting as a raw material for many industries. So this is how we can say that resources are even a source for raw material. And third, we need to see resources as a energy, or they produce or they act as an energy resource. We can take again example of coal, petroleum, natural gas. Yes, they they etc are used as a fuel in industries as well as in as a domestic fuel. They generate energy. Yes, so even we can say wind, seawater, tides, ebbs, waterfall, all these are resource and ultimately they generate energy. So this is how there are few resource which are acting as a energy source, So here we have seen resource as a food, resource as a source of raw material, and resource as a energy resource. Now moving further, we'll discuss about types of resources. Now resources can be classified into different categories on the basis of ownership, on the basis of re-availability, that is once again they are available, or on the basis of distribution centers. Here we have bifurcated resources on the basis of ownership and resources on the basis of their distribution. So let us understand this table. First table is talking about resources bifurcated or divided on the basis of ownership. So when we talk about ownership, we have three kinds of ownership: individual ownership, national ownership, and global ownership. Right? There are certain resources which are owned individually. There are certain resources which are owned by the nation, by a country, and there are resources which are globally owned. So we can bifurcate it as individual resource, national resource, and global resource. Now coming to individual resource, the explanation says owned by individual or a family. Yes, the example they have given, land, building. Yes, say for example the house in which you are living. It might be owned by your father or a grandfather or your mother. So it is an individual resource. It is an individual resource. Coming to next category, we have national resource, that is owned by a country or a region. Let us say Indian Army. So who possesses this Indian Army, or who is the owner of Indian Army? Our country, India, is the owner of Indian Army. If I talk about international trade which takes place, who is the owner of that international trade? Again, our country, India. And coming to the third category from ownership point of view, that is global resource, or physical or non-physical resources which are used for human welfare. Yes, resources of common ownership of all nations of the world. I would like to give an example of ocean. Yes, after few kilometers, the ocean, yes, that the ocean is, we call it as an international resource, global resource. It is not possessed by any country. Yes, after few kilometers from the country in the ocean area, that the remaining part of the ocean is owned internationally. It is not owned by any individual nation. So it becomes a global resource. It becomes a global resource. So this is how, from ownership point of view, we can divide resources into three categories: individual resource, national resource, and global resource. I repeat, this is ownership point of view. Now let us talk about the another bifurcation or classification of resource on the basis of their distribution. So distribution, according to the distribution area, we have universal resource, we have generally available resource, we have rare resources, and we have solitary resources. Universal resources are useful gases in the atmosphere. Yes, nothing but we can say oxygen, nitrogen, or many other gases. They are universal resources. They are categorized as universal resources. Next category we have is a generally available resources. Means they are easily available. Here we have the example like land, soil, water, pasture land. These are the examples of generally available resources. Very easily they are available. The third category we have as a rare resources. Rare, which is not seen that frequently. Those resources are limited or found at limited places. We have resources like coal, petroleum, copper, gold, uranium, thorium, many more. These are resources, but they are examples of rare resources. They are not found in abundance, they are not found in large scale, or we can say they are not found everywhere. So they are categorized as a rare resource. And the last but not the least, we have solitary resources. Minerals available only at one or two places in the world. Very, very rarest of the rare, I can say. Here they have taken an example or given an example as cryolite, which is available only in Greenland, a country called Greenland. So such resources are categorized under solitary resources. So students, I hope you are able to understand this classification of resources on the basis of distribution of area. Moving further, we can talk about planning and conservation of resources. Now, why we need to, first of all, the question should arise, why we need to plan, why we need to conserve the resource? The simple answer to this question is that one of the very important characteristics of resource is resources are scarce, resources are limited. Yes, Human needs are unlimited while the resources are very limited. And as resources are limited, it's very important for every individual, for every nation to plan and to conserve these resources. During last 100 years, usage of resources has increased very much, all because of advancement of science and technology, and mainly because of population explosion. So day by day, the usage of resources is going on increasing. It keep on increasing. The word conservation is directly related to it. Scarcity of resource. Day by day, we are feeling scarcity of resource. If the resources are exploited at the same rate, at a current rate, where they are exploited haphazardly and irrationally, then it will be a dream to maintain the development and the current lifestyle. We cannot maintain the pace. The current lifestyle which we are living might not be able to continue for a longer period of time. I would like to throw one very simple example. We know petrol is a very important resource, it acts as a fuel, but it is very scarce. We know day by day the prices are increasing. It is very important to plan and conserve this resource. It is very important for the government to save and conserve it. And definitely government is taking steps, right? And not only Indian government throughout the world, they are taking steps to plan and conserve this resource. A day will come definitely after few years that petrol will not be anymore in the world, right? Because it's a resource which will ultimately get exhausted over a period of time, right? So what we need to do, it is a scarce resource. We need to plan for it. We need to conserve it so that it lasts for a longer period of time. And that is why planning and conservation of resources is very important. Students, I hope you understood. Yes, the concept of planning and conservation of resources. Right. Now, moving to the next point, we have, let us understand about planning and conservation of resources in detail. Yes, we'll go into the details of it. First of all, gather information about the availability of utilized, unutilized, and probable resources of any region or a country as a unit. Now, to plan, to conserve the resource, what is the first step? Here they are showing the first step. The first step is to get the information. We have to collect the information that in which country or in which region, which type of resources, in what quantity is available, right? So that is the first step. If you want to plan, if you want to conserve, that is the first step, gather the information. Then the resources which are limited, or we studied non-renewable resources, should be exploited scientifically and should be used only when it is necessary to use them. I repeat, I am talking about non-renewable resource, and we are very much well versed. Non-renewable, which cannot be renewed. So we need to, sparingly use this resource. We need to make sure that the resource, not a single resource, not a small quantity, even the small quantity of resource should get wasted, because we know once exhausted, they are exhausted forever. Next, attempt should be made to develop those resources, the quality of which can be increased. We have to try, we have to make sure that the quantity, we have to make sure, we have to attempt for increasing the quantity of the resources. Yes, we need to make sure that we try to increase the quantity if possible for the resources where we can. So attempts should be made to develop those resources, the quantity of which can be increased. Say for example, we have few resources whose quantity can be increased, right? Few renewable resources, right? Whose quantity can be increased. So we need to try, we need to keep trying to increase their quantity so that ultimately it can be reutilized, right? Let us take one example of electricity being produced with the help of those the solar energy. We produce solar energy, we produce electricity via solar, the solar panels. So now we need to try and increase this quantity of electricity being produced with the help of solar energy. Similarly, we produce energy with the help of windmills. So we need to keep on trying to increase the quantity of that energy. Yes, ultimately it will help us in future, for the future development. Next, the resources which are cheaper and are easily available should not be wasted. We should not think that the resource is cheaper, so we should waste it, we should use it recklessly. No. Instead, they should be used sparingly for future use. Sparingly is conservatively. We have to utilize such resources conservatively, because overall characteristics of resources says that they are scarce, they are limited, right? So whichever the resource may be, but we need to make sure, we need to always give a command that resources should not be wasted. They should be preserved, they should be conserved, and they should be utilized in a sparing manner. Now, next, those resources which are in limited quantity should be conserved. That is very true. Yes, the resources who are right from the beginning in a limited quantity, we need to preserve it, we need to conserve it. We need to find out an option, yes, alternative option through technical development in favorable in long term. Yes, again taking an example of electricity. We know normally electricity is produced with the help of coal, but we know coal is a non-renewable resource. Once it get exhausted, it will exhaust forever. So we need to find out an alternative way to produce energy. And not only that, after finding out an alternative way, say for example, the alternative way might be producing energy through windmills or producing energy through water, right? So tidal power, that is. So we need to make sure that we are producing more of these resources via those technologies, and ultimately we are saving, we are conserving the original resource. So again, the bottom line says one thing: save resources. Necessary laws should be formed for the conservation of resource and should be enforced strictly. Yes, government has to take some steps. Definitely government has taken the steps. Yes, government has prepared some rules and regulations, and they should do so for the preservation and conservation of resources. If any person is wasting the resources, is found wasting the resources, government should take immediate steps, actions, yes, so that ultimately the resources can be saved. Again, the reason is the same, because we have very scarce resources. Last, citizen should be well acquainted, means well versed with all facts associated with the rational use of resources, and a public awareness should be cultivated. That means all the citizens should be aware how to make use of this resource. Yes, they should be taught right from the beginning, from their childhood, right, that these resources are scarce and we need to make a optimum utilization of resources. Student, this chapter, why it is kept in your syllabus? Again, the reason is the same. This chapter or this particular point is kept in your syllabus because you are the citizen, you are the future citizen of India, and being a future of India, you should be well versed with the term resources, with its minimum or optimum utilization. You should be well versed that the resources are scarce. You should be well versed that how we need to make use of resources. So it's very important for all of us to make sure that resources are conserved, preserved, protected, and a proper planning of the resources should take place. Then and then only our country can develop. Then and then only we can have a longer availability of resources. I hope students things are very clear to you. Yes, next time we'll discuss one more topic, right? Till then, goodbye. Yes, bye bye. Thank you.